Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce this item submitted by Mayor Delgleize, Mayor Pro Tem Posey, and Councilmember Kalmick. Requests that staff engage a process to facilitate City Council selection of outside legal firm that would report directly to and support City Council. I'm just going to make a few comments, and then council members can go ahead and comment if they would like. I appreciate the input from everyone who weighed in on this issue. In my view, there are legitimate opinions and several important interests on all sides to recognize. Local government in a city such as Huntington Beach is complicated and litigious. As part-time volunteer city council members, we need legal advice and substantive expertise to help us make informed decisions about what's best for the city. Frequently, we can depend on the city attorney and his staff to provide that service, but sometimes we cannot, and we, as the city council, must be able to decide infrequently when that is. As it's been explained to me, the California rules of professional responsibility dictate that when a lawyer represents an entity such as a city, the lawyer must take direction from the entity, such as board of directors, the city council in this case. Unfortunately, we've seen a few instances where that has not happened, and we must find a way to address that. Undoubtedly, Mr. Gates has articulated an important interest as well. Protecting his interpretation of the authority of the city charter may give him over legal matters in the city. The voters adopted that charter. Their actions must be respected, and the charter is not etched in stone. And I do not believe the allocation of authority in the charter is as clear-cut as Mr. Gates says it is. For example, Section 304B of the city charter says that City Council shall have control of all legal business and that we may employ other attorneys to take charge of legal issues. That seems clear. But with the charter provision he cites, there are conflicts in areas of interpretation. And for the good of the city, the efficient operation for this council, we need to clarify these issues. I respect the role of the elected city attorney, and I also know that in any city, the city council is the primary authority. In an attorney-client relationship, the client should give direction and should not be threatened by its lawyer. I believe that we can define circumstances under which the City Council can seek a second opinion or specialized legal advice without approval of the city attorney. I think we should draw up a definition and make charter clearer so that we can resolve these issues once and for all. I believe that the voters will approve a common sense traditional approach to the city attorney, city council, and city manager city manager relationship, which we should ask staff to draft and propose a charter amendment to effect as soon as possible. And the reason I'm reading that first is I appreciate all the people's comments coming down here tonight, but my disappointment, Mr. Gates, was that the response to this by you, and well, it's you, I can't really say it's your department, I was kind of taken back by in my opinion, the extremity of it all. I've spoken to you over the years many times. Could we just get a second opinion? Could we hire another firm? Not usurping you as the city attorney. You are the city attorney. You were elected as the city attorney. I'm not suggesting that you go anywhere. I'm just saying that you are not omnipresent. You don't know everything. And there are things that we have to go outside for. We've done it. You've brought in people on topics as well. So that's for me for right now. I'm going to let everybody else get a chance to talk, but those were my thoughts for the moment. And let's see who we have here. Mr. Kalmick.
Thank you, Mayor Delgleize. I think you laid out the idea that I think we talked about. I was also extremely surprised at the very public way that the city attorney reacted to us asking for a second opinion. And I think he effectively proved the point why we need a second opinion. Because we're in a somewhat Bugs Bunny-esque Looney Tunes situation here where the person I would go to respond to someone that had threatened lawsuit would be my city attorney, who is the person that threatened lawsuit. That I would then go to the person that would ask about that, which is my city attorney, and we end up in this circular argument of someone claiming they're both the plaintiff and the defendant. And if we were to get served, how do we assert that? And we would need, obviously, someone else representing us. And if we get into an edge case where the city attorney wouldn't let us do that according to his interpretation of the charter, we're stuck. And I think that that's the issue, is that we're stuck in this interpretation that when we have a conflict of interest and we have an adverse relationship at this point, we are kind of stuck. And, I look at this as asking for not to usurp the authority of the elected city attorney. No one's asking to hire a law firm to write resolutions and ordinances and represent us in court. This is the corporate body of the city council who is the client of the city attorney's office, which was elected by the residents, who has threatened to sue us. And some of us, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the course of the last several years, which is bananas, absurd, I think is really the word that sits here. And so we're at kind of if you take the legal conclusions that Mr. Gates laid out in his letter, which uses the word I quite a bit, and in his multiple posts on social media, we start to see that you take it to its extent that I and I alone can interpret the charter. I and I alone represent all the legal authority within the city of Huntington Beach. If Apple's corporate attorney released a public letter basically saying that I and I alone control this, they'd be fired. Like, that's not how this works. We're the client, and Mr. Gates contends that the citizens of Huntington Beach are his client. And yes, they are, but they've elected us to be their proxy. And the adverse relationship that we've ended up in shows that our charter we've hit another charter issue that, again, in this year of 2021 have found a lot of issues that our charter's not clear on. Under the rules of professional conduct, a lawyer can't represent a client if there's a significant risk to the lawyer's representation of that client will be materially limited by the lawyer's own interests. And in this case, we're being threatened with, we were vaguely threatened with a lawsuit, and then we received a letter from an attorney representing Mr. Gates, and I'm not quite clear in what position that is, him personally, as an elected employee, as the elected official, as the representative of the city of Huntington Beach, because the letter we received was on city letterhead, so that's a department threatening to sue their client. It seems completely absurd to me that we're put into this position. And at this point, the attorney that Mr. Gates is asserting I would go to would be him to ask for his permission to hire outside counsel that he would then oversee, as we've seen in a previous case in this city. And again, we hit this wall of absurdity of someone's getting up from one desk in trial to move to the next desk in a trial and running both sides here, and it just seems completely absurd. And that was the small ask here, was for counsel in limited circumstances to be able to ask for a second opinion. And in this case, I want to know what to do. That my city attorney has threatened to sue me. And so I would like to have someone who's not the city attorney represent this body, this corporate body, when its elected corporate attorney has threatened lawsuit. It seems really clear to me and pretty straightforward. That's the only ask. We're not looking to usurp that authority. It's just that this city attorney has threatened lawsuit against this body and individuals in this body on multiple occasions, which, again, is not really something I've seen any attorney ever do to their client. So that's all I have right now.
Mr. Posey?
Yeah, I'll start with a couple of things. One is you're exactly right, Mr. Kalmick. We're not looking to usurp any authority, undermine the city attorney's authority, engage outside counsel for anything other than a second opinion. With respect to the city attorney's office, this council and previous councils have given the city attorney's office every tool that was asked, every single tool. We're only asking for one tool in return, and that's a little bit of reciprocity, in that we would like a second opinion and sometimes a first opinion. And I'll give you 3 examples of, and I'll be brief, I promise, of what my concerns are. We talk about the Kennedy Commission a lot. The Kennedy Commission, as of right now, has a $3.5 million legal fees judgment, or an award, not a judgment, an award. Once that's reduced to 0, then of course we can claim all victories with the Kennedy Commission. But that's not really my issue. My issue is that the lawsuit with the Kennedy Commission was avoidable. And if you go back to, I think it was October of 2014, the City Council then had a discussion about reducing the demand within the BECSP. We've heard a lot about Dave Sullivan tonight, and Dave Sullivan opined then that he was concerned about legal ramifications about modifying the demand. Apparently, they got legal advice from the previous city attorney to not modify the demand because they did not modify the demand, presumably because of concern about legal ramifications. When we decided to talk about the same issue, which was reduced demand, in 2015, Mr. Gates recused himself from the discussion. On social media, he said that that was a policy discussion that he didn't need to be in. Well, almost all of our discussions are policy discussions. Which ones do you not need to be in? The ones that you're conflicted or not conflicted? And if you're conflicted to not be present during the conversation, are you similarly conflicted to defend or not defend? So my issue is that, and I applaud your victories, there's no doubt about that. We're not taking anything away from you, although the state legislature did. They took one of your victories and crafted legislation so that that loophole couldn't be exploited again by another city. That, of course, was Senate Bill 1333. So that's the Kennedy Commission. The second one was our lawsuit on SB 35, which was my idea. I brought it up at the council dais, and your office, the city attorney's office, responded with an unsolicited presentation about the benign threat that SB 35 was. So I came back in August while I was mayor, and I asked for a legal exclusion to SB 35, knowing that we were vulnerable to the diktats of SB 35 because our housing element was out of compliance as a result of the May 2015 legislation. The legal exclusion, the proper advice, in my opinion, and the opinion of others, was that simply certify the housing element and you'd be exempt from SB 35. Your advice was to sue over SB 35. We haven't yet won. We also are exposed to around $500,000 in legal fees, again, on SB 35. So that's number 2. And then number 3, of course, is the famous HB versus SCAG. That was potential litigation that you brought to closed session but were not present to argue about. My decision to take no action was predicated on Irvine already losing to SCAG in 2009 and losing on appeal. That was brought back 2 weeks later by Mr. Peterson, where we again decided to take no action. But that doesn't mean we don't want to fight SCAG. It means we want to fight where we can potentially win, and since the cities versus SCAG was already adjudicated and lost on appeal, that the policymakers at OCOG decided to sue HCD after conferring with our legal counsel, as HCD was the more appropriate target. Of course, we lost there too, and the courts ruled that that case, suing a SCAG or HCD over RENA, was not for judicial review. What they said, and what the court said in so many words, was that the battle against high density, or the battle against SCAG, the battle against RENA, is legislation, not litigation. And the battle is to be fought by the policymakers. Policymakers decide if we're going to fight. We decide how we're going to fight, and we direct, if there is going to be litigation, we direct the city attorney to fight. You, of course, give us the advice on how to fight. We decide if we're going to fight. So all I want is to have your cooperation to seek a second opinion. And a second opinion, the upside is that in most cases, the second opinion is probably going to agree with you. You're going to get confirmation and affirmation that your legal advice is sound. And the issue is that if it doesn't agree, we still may not agree with the second opinion. And then the last thing I'll close with is that we have the ability to, since you are serving as our legal advisor, and then some. I don't mean to minimize your role, because I'm not. Is that we have the option to accept your advice, and we have the option to reject your advice. With that option to accept or reject, we should also have the option to get a second opinion to confirm your advice or confirm what we might think may not be the best path forward. So, and then, one more thing. And then the last thing, in your letter on page 4, you write, rule, it is the responsibility of each department head to obtain authorization from the city attorney's office prior to discussion contact. The city council is not a department. We're not a department head. We're the governing body. So, departments is staff. So,
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Well, most of you know how I feel anyway about this, but the Kennedy Commission, you forgot one thing. Yeah, Mr. Gates wasn't giving us legal opinions in 2015, but we did go through many study sessions in this room with actually Villaseñor actually said this is not going to affect our arena, and we went on that because that was a discussion we were having. We were worried about that. Apparently it did affect it, and honestly, Mr. Gates did give us advice in closed session one time and said if you just take care of the housing element part, that part of it goes away, we've won everything else. But instead of just doing it, and without the Kennedy Commission involved, we went and gave back stuff we had already prevailed on.
So just, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do want to be careful about us disclosing closed session discussion. I know it's tricky. It's going to be tricky for me to respond to this stuff because I may have a pretty good defense and I won't be able to communicate.
Well, you actually already did that in your letter.
No, I didn't.
Sir, you did.
And so anyway, I think if we would have just taken, maybe these fees wouldn't be here if we didn't give them concessions on, like I said, everything we already prevailed on and had just addressed one thing. Also, we had, you mentioned the discrimination thing, which was a winnable case, and this council folded. And they gave it away. They thought they were going to lose at the end, or it was going to cost too much money. And then you hire an attorney to investigate. That whole thing that was approved step by step for years. I don't know why you did that. There is methods to hire outside attorneys. You can ask the city attorney. We can as a group, maybe not individually, but as a group. When the city was being sued by Shana Lathis because Kim Carr removed her from a board, she thought it was unfair. It was an easy open and closed case. She had every right to do that. But this council didn't want to have our city attorney's office represent. We went to outside counsel. That was approved. So it happens. I mean, there's a thing that we can ask the city attorney to do this. If we go individually and say, hey, I want someone else to look at this, that's not how it works. It has to be all of us. And there hasn't been one thing that this attorney's office has done that we haven't approved. I mean, when you say that, we control all legal processes, we do. He comes back and says, this is it. What do you want to do? Left or right? He gives his opinion. And at that point, if you say, hey, I don't agree with this opinion, I've heard from different, then that's the time maybe everyone says, hey, can we get another opinion? Can you hire someone? And that happens. But we vote on every single thing he does, every time. So there is a method there. you know, all the city attorneys, you know, we have departments hiring city attorneys all the time. Those contracts are supposed to go through the city attorney. He doesn't have to go pick them, but you know, if we're going to get those attorneys, it goes through them. This is what the charter says, and you can talk to 50 different lawyers and get 50 different answers on how they interpret it. And I'll ask Mr. Gates to remark on that, but I believe that it's his responsibility to hire those, and we do have a way to do that. Also, I did talk to, you said, you know, we've been upset for a long time, all the council members. I talked to every single elected council member except for these ones that are here, asking about them. And not one person had a concern. Ms. Hardy's concern was that we were implementing a new policy based on a specific person, i.e. we're thinking about Michael Gates with this and we're implementing a policy, and she thought that was completely wrong. She also said that she believes it violates the charter. I talked to, you've heard from Dave Sullivan, I talked to every council member that's worked with Michael, less the ones that are here, because sort of know how you guys feel. I think there's a process. I think we should use that process. If you guys want to, let him find the attorney, or maybe you have someone and he can hire it, and we can be transparent and tell people, hey, we're hiring outside counsel to do this. I don't care, but I think for us to just go out and hire an attorney, I think is wrong. So that's where I stand on this.
Mr. Posey? Okay. Ms. Bolton?
Thank you, ma'am. So I've read your letter, Mr. Gates, and also the letter from your attorney, and I have read the H item, and I have read the cases that were cited in the various letters, and I have read the charter provisions. And this is just, to me, really an unfortunate situation. I do agree that we should be able to work this out, but I just have never witnessed anything like this. And I feel like, you know, I'm a person who's coming into this situation without the history that everybody else has. But I do know this. It is correct that a lawyer cannot represent a client and sue that client. We can't do that under the rules of professional responsibility. My concern is this situation is such that we are in an adversarial posture, and that's unfortunate. You know, I'm not going to blame anybody for that. That just seems to be what it is. If we're in an adversarial posture with our own attorney, then the rules of professional responsibility dictate that we have our own counsel. The concern that I have is where there is a conflict. The client needs to have different counsel. I think that the charter provisions, 304B and 309, are inconsistent. In light of that, and I also I'm not aware of any case law that has addressed this precise point. I've heard a lot and read a lot about the O'Connor case. From my perspective, the O'Connor case is different because it was talking about power within the city attorney's office dealing with a situation that involved a deputy city attorney and a city attorney. It was not a situation where we were talking about a city attorney's office having a conflict. What I would suggest is this. If there is a way for us to agree on a process for being able to deal with situations where, as we are now, in an adversarial position with our own attorney, I would hope that we can figure out what that process would be. Otherwise, we don't have any choice other than litigation, which would be really, really unfortunate. I would not want to see the city of Huntington Beach splashed across the front pages of the newspaper for having this type of dispute. And I think it's gone far enough. It's all over social media. I'm disappointed to see this play out on social media. We're grown-ups. So it is my hope that we can, agree on a process, because it is my view that if we are going to be in an adversarial posture with you, Mr. Gates, that the City Council would need to have its own legal advisor. Thank you.
And Mayor, do you mind if I respond?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Please, oh, no. Sorry. I thought you were going to just make a comment. Please be seated. I'm going to have Ms. Carr speak. Ms. Mosier, and then, sorry, Ms. Mosier. Forgive me, I was looking at Michael.
No problem. So first, thank you to Councilmember Bolton. That really did shed a lot of light on various things, and included one of the things that I had noted within the charter, and that was that 304B and 309 are inconsistent. And 304B specifically says, the City Council shall have control of all legal business and proceedings and all property of the legal department, and may employ other attorneys to take charge of or may contract for any prosecution, litigation, or other legal matter or business. And I do know that 309 is not, it basically in some ways goes against that. So that is confusing. That being said, the charter, it is internally inconsistent. That presents a problem, especially when moments like this occur, when we are in an adversarial position and in conflict. We do need to be able to get impartial legal advice, and advice when there is potential conflict of interest as well. That being said, Councilmember Peterson mentioned former Mayor Hardy's comment about it being specific to Mr. Gates. And I actually think that is a good point. And in my mind, this isn't about something being specific to Mr. Gates. And I do think it would be a problem if it was. Yeah. I think that we need to clarify within the charter to make the relationship clearer when there is a problem or a concern with regards to the city attorney's office and council. So that way, future councils, future city attorney relationships are clarified. So this doesn't happen. And that doesn't matter if it's with Mr. Gates or if it's with a whole other different council. I think it's important to find some way forward to be able to clarify that so we don't have this type of problem. And I think that, hopefully with the charter review that will help, but perhaps we do need to do something as Councilmember Bolton was discussing, and, how do we move forward with this? And find some type of process to be able to mitigate this. We need to be able to have counsel that supports us, if there is, as it is in this case, an issue and a conflict. So,
Ms. Carr.
Thank you. It was interesting listening to the speakers this afternoon when Resident Rob Poole said, 4 days before Christmas, can you believe that we're actually talking about this? And I had the same conversation with Mr. Gates earlier today. I said, I can't believe 4 days before Christmas we're having this conversation, and how did we get here? Because really what I see this as is a lack of focus. And if you look at this city, if you look at our responsibilities, we are a corporation. In fact, the charter defines the city of Huntington Beach as a municipal corporation. The city council is the board of directors of that corporation. The city manager is the CEO of that corporation. And Mr. Gates is the head of the legal department for that corporation. And there's been a lot of emotion about this and everything, but the reality is this board of directors, this city council, we are the voice of the people, not Mr. Gates, as it was asserted earlier this afternoon that Mr. Gates is the voice of the people. No, he is not. He is not, and he has said that, and I hope people understand that. Mr. Gates is the head of the legal department. So when we talk about the O'Connor case, that was an issue where you had a rogue employee who is basically going out and saying that he was the voice of the city, the legal department, and he was meeting with council members. And so it was clarified that there needs to be one voice for the legal department, which is the city attorney. I don't think anybody disputes that. But we as a corporation, that is a high-functioning corporation, that is a city that is enviable right now. This city council and this city has done more in this past year than any other city in Orange County. There's a reason that Oliver Chi, our city manager, also our CEO, is getting poached, is because he's done a bang-up job. And I get asked all the time from people, hey, how are you guys doing all of this? So given all of the good work that this city is doing, this city is firing on every cylinder. How unfortunate it is that we have this coming before us today. And the question really becomes, you know, how did we get here, right? How did we get here? And you only need to read this letter to know how we got here. And that's really unfortunate because in this letter, I believe that the city attorney has violated the confidentiality of closed session. And I have wondered, why do people in this town think that we don't support our city attorney? He's received a raise. He's actually had his spending limit increased. There really isn't anything that we haven't given this city attorney. Now, we may differ on how we want to go forward on lawsuits or whether we sue the state or not. And I, for one, as most people know, have voted against suing the state of California because I didn't see a pathway to victory. And you know what? I was right. But in hindsight, I get it. This council wanted to fight. But whether this council chooses to do that or not, it's up to us. It's not up to the city attorney. But there's a misconception somehow in our community that we are not allowing Mr. Gates to do his job, that we're not letting him fight for the city. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We actually get along with Mr. Gates and we support him, and most of the decisions that come out are in favor of supporting him. But when it comes to suing the state or it comes to our housing element, that's where it gets a little funky because we have different opinions on how to go about that. I personally look at it and say, you know what? We probably don't need to sue the state, but maybe we need to tighten up some of our ordinances, especially with SB 9 and SB 10. As it was mentioned, you have to opt in for SB 10. And there are so few parcels of land in Huntington Beach that actually qualify for SB 9. But, you know, we could tighten up the ordinance a little bit, and that's where Mr. Gates would be very helpful. But to go and sue the state of California, where you're probably going to lose, and it's probably going to cost you millions of dollars when you do lose, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers to make sure that your dollars are spent wisely. We can't afford $3.5 million judgments against us or a $500,000 judgment against us. Right now, this city has a $10 million surplus. That's the first time we've had a surplus in decades. And it would have been more had we not had unfavorable judgments against us. So when it comes to suing the state of California, we need to be mindful of what the end game is. It's to have our local control. But there's ways to do that without suing the state of California. So getting back to why are we here now? I actually, when I first read this H item, I was a bit perplexed by it because I thought, wait a minute, we can already do that. And we have done that. We hire outside legal all the time. But when there's this mistrust with your city attorney, when you feel that the city attorney is violating that confidentiality of closed session, when the city attorney comes to the podium to berate a city council member for making a quote in a newspaper article that, quite frankly, I didn't even know what Mr. Gates was talking about because I didn't read that newspaper article. Those are the sort of judgment calls that you have to question. This letter was a judgment call. The post on social media, those are judgment calls. And we need our city attorney to back us because we back him. And so if we decide not to sue the state of California, the city attorney should be silent on that because this council has made a policy decision. And I hope that he supports us. So when I hear from people saying, you're not letting Michael fight, I think, why are they getting that idea? Is Michael Gates out there saying that he doesn't agree with the city council, his client, and that he's not fighting because he's not able to, because some way we are holding him back? We've never held him back. We tell him what to do based on the recommendations that he gives us. He is the head of the legal department. So again, I'm looking at this and I'm saddened that we're here because I think this could have been handled so much differently. I think that we can come up with a way to say, you know what, we do hire outside legal, and there are going to be times if we are in conflict that we need to get our own legal. But for the 99.9% of the time, it's Mr. Gates, and he's the voice of our legal department. Like any corporation, was mentioned Apple, Apple has its own legal department. I come from a Fortune 500 world where everything is corporate. It's very common to have a legal department where if you have a question, you ask the head of the legal department, and that's it. But the head of the legal department does not speak for the city. Our charter actually defines that. It's actually Mayor Delgleize. You are the spokesperson for the city. So my hope tonight is that we can just say the charter is in conflict. I hope we do a charter amendment so that we're not in conflict anymore with this, and that we can go forward with hiring our own legal if necessary, but then also understanding that Mr. Gates is the head of the legal department. So maybe there's a way that we can more narrowly define what the ask is tonight. Because I was, like I said, a little bit confused because I felt as though section, I should know it off the top of my head, is it 303B? 304B clearly defines that the city council shall have control of all legal business and proceedings of all property, blah-de-da, you guys have heard it 1,000 times, that you can hire your own legal. So my hope tonight is that we can do that, come up with something that is a little bit, but at the same time recognize that Mr. Gates is the city attorney. He was elected by the people to be the city attorney, and the city attorney is the head of the legal department within this corporation called the City of Huntington Beach. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I'd also like to ask, I'm not sure who I direct this to, but I think a number of us have commented on the issue with the charter. It's in conflict. It needs to be corrected. So I think that's number one. And also, Ms. Carr said something that really made sense to me. Why do you go on social media to brag about what you're doing? I know. I should say it's a rhetorical question because, to me, it makes it look like you are commenting against the people that you're representing. So that's my question. I do believe we need to modernize the charter, but also, too, it's just like we need to modernize the agreement that we talked about earlier with Republic. It was so outdated. Well, the charter's the same way. The city has grown. Things have changed. And you and I are not going to be here forever, so there may be another council down the road. So that was alluded to a little bit ago. Mr. Peterson.
Yes, I would just like to hear Mr. Gates' response to.
He'll have his chance.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So there's a lot to unpack here. I won't try to unpack it all. I really will try to be as brief as possible. At the heart of it, what we're dealing with is we're stuck together. We're stuck together. That's the way the charter frames it. That's what the voters have decided. We're stuck together. And as much as you might not prefer my style or my presentation or my results, I may not prefer yours, right? I may want to select the mayor. Maybe that's my preference, right? But I don't get to, because the charter and all of our other rules have outlined how this all works. There are a lot of things that have been said tonight that I agree with, that you have all said. There are some things that I disagree with. But the reality is we're stuck together. When you're looking to resolve a conflict between the two provisions that we've been commonly citing or frequently citing in the charter, the Court of Appeal already resolved those conflicts, apparent conflicts, and you may not like the result, but this is a 3-judge Court of Appeal panel. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing. And we've abided by, as the city, Court of Appeal decisions in the past. And so the Court of Appeal said the city attorney is the department head. The city's legal business, only one legal voice in the city attorney. The city council may hire other attorneys to help the city attorney discharge her official duties, but may not relieve her of such duties. Any such attorneys hired by the city council are under the city attorney's supervision and have no authority to give opinions or act independently. When you want a second opinion, you're suggesting you want somebody to act independently. Mayor, you started your comments by saying that I am to take direction from the board or the council, and that there were many instances where I have not executed on your direction. Let me be abundantly clear to the council and to the public watching. I take direction from you on decisions pertaining to lawsuits, whether it's to file or not file, appeal or not appeal, settle or not settle, for how much do we settle. I have always, and I will underscore, always faithfully executed that direction. I have. Now, when you and I alone are in a hallway and you're like, I'd like to see if we could get some other legal counsel, that's not direction from the city council. I take direction pursuant to a vote. And former Mayor Carr actually described our relationship perfectly. The only thing I would add to that, Councilmember Carr, is, and there's a ton to unpack here, I'm going to try to be brief. My duty is to the city, which is the corporation. The board, like the corporation, is you, the council. I take direction from you as the spokesperson or the voice or even the decision makers for the corporation, right? The only caveat is when you, in essence, and this goes along with what I was saying in my letter and what the other attorney said in his letter, is when you, by this H item, decide to then violate the law, you're running afield of your fiduciary duty to the corporation. I don't go with you. I don't go with you. I cannot violate the law, and I couldn't do that in private practice. If I had a client, a witness who's going to go up on the stand, he leaned over and said, "Hey, I'm about to go lie up on the stand." I'd have to be, stop, Your Honor, sidebar. I can't suborn perjury. I can't allow my client to support perjury. If I had a client who was about to go out and commit a crime, I couldn't aid and abet or participate in a crime. It's a similar thing. So I 100% have always faithfully executed my duties as the city's lawyer, Mayor, on every single direction, every single vote that you have taken. I have never wavered. I have faithfully executed. So that is really the key. And when you say, well, we want a second opinion because we don't like what we're getting, look, I'll read something for you, and it may be surprising to you, it may not be, and while I'm not going to get into any attorney-client conversations that we've had in closed session, and I didn't in the letter, we know from public records, I can put it that way, that in addition to the expertise offered by the 8 attorneys in my office, we also know over the past 7 years I have retained tons of legal counsel to give us additional counsel, to give us second opinions. Mayor, you even said it yourself. I'd like a second opinion at times. I like the expertise. And then you turned around and said, yeah, and there's been a bunch of times where you've hired outside lawyers. So I feel like there's something going on here that's not really being spoken. I've hired Prop 218 legal experts, state redevelopment legal experts, appellate law experts, HR, labor, human and human resources law experts, police practices experts, legal experts, property rights and inverse commendation legal experts, bond attorneys, housing law experts. The list goes on and on. We should not be having this discussion out here. This should be a discussion that we have in closed session when counsel says, you know, Gates, I think we need some more legal advice, right? And predating some of you, we have had those types of conversations. There have been things that have been tabled or put off, and you know we need to come back with some more analysis. It doesn't happen very often, but it has happened. That's the kind of thing that you should be, you know, coming to me at the closed session table and asking for. I've never denied such a request from counsel, ever. So when you say, well, we can find some compromise, there's got to be an arrangement. The arrangement is, hey, folks, let's go into closed session. Let's talk about a case. We present our briefs to you. We present our analysis to you. We talk about it. And if you want more, ask for more, and I'll get it for you. I have literally bent over backwards to try to give this council, in terms of good customer service, every single thing that they have asked for. And let me tell you something. Outside counsel is not the answer to everything. The Kennedy Commission was dead in the water at the first round of legal battles. Do you remember what happened with the Kennedy Commission? It was with outside counsel at the request of City Council. Colin Tuno and Associates represented the city in the first round. We in the City Attorney's Office snatched that case from the jaws of defeat by bringing it in-house and doing all the appellate work. That's when we started winning. And in terms of my recusal at the time, and you guys are making a policy decision, look, the city attorney is here to answer questions, but it's up to you guys to decide on policy. And when I recused myself, I had our municipal law land use expert chief city attorney sitting in my stead available to you, and I don't know if he ever got any questions from you. So I don't want to sit here and relitigate history.
Okay.
But there is a response to all this stuff, and there's only half the story being presented tonight. There's a whole other host of issues. The Senior Center is another case, Mayor, where it had been in litigation for 10 years. You know, after I took office, I took it over.
Mayor Delgleize, we're getting, I think, well past.
Okay,
what
I know. I was just going to let him finish his thought, and then we were going to move on.
Thank you. I brought it in-house and got that thing resolved in a couple months, and then it opened.
Right.
What you're proposing tonight, it is illegal. It's illegal on the face of the charter, and I understand, but there's this other provision. The Court of Appeal already answered the question.
Well, let's do this, Michael, because I think all of us are in a place where we would like to make this work, and I believe that you do too.
Look, I want to stress one more thing. I want to do the absolute best legal job for the city I could possibly do. I lay awake at night stressing and worrying about cases.
We all do.
Okay, but I do too.
Yeah.
And my goal is to provide the absolute best legal representation. This whole thing about, you're out on social media and the response letter and stuff like that. Look, don't bring fights to me publicly, because I am an elected official and my constituents expect me. Where's Gates on this? Where's Gates on this? Don't fight with me publicly.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Just don't do it. But the H item is a public fight. We could have had this discussion in closed session.
Yes, and I think the mistake here is that many of the comments on social media is your way of letting us know how you feel.
Look, let me one more fine point. I'm going to put a fine point on this. The public's got to know this. You guys decide what fights to fight. I never speak publicly about policy. You don't believe me?
I'm just smiling because
look for anything out there on policy, anything, and you won't find it. I'll a steak dinner. I'll get you a steak dinner if you can find anything
You've
that I've
said
ever
that in
said out there
public
on
now.
policy.
I've got you in public saying that.
Well,
what I'd like
I'm
to
ready-
see happen is
for my
create a
steak.
meeting and we can resolve this. Have a seat. I'd like to see if there's anybody else on the council. Any comments to close? Yes, go ahead, Ms. Bolton. Please have a seat, Mr. Gates.
Okay, so just one point of clarification. I do believe that we disagree. We fundamentally disagree about the legality of what the council is seeking to do when the city attorney has a conflict, because the charter is not clear.
I can answer that for you. It's really simple. It's up to the attorney to make the determination of whether there's a conflict. It's not up to anyone in the room to just say, hey, we don't like what's going on, conflict. It's up to the attorney. I did that in another case. I recused myself, and we hired outside counsel. If there is ever another instance, and there doesn't ever have to be in the history of time, be a conflict between us, if there ever was, then you could have your choice of counsel for that issue, that conflict. Sure. So that is the answer. If there's a conflict, you can. And if this were to somehow result in a declaratory relief action or something, you're entitled to counsel, your own counsel on that to fight that battle. But are we honestly having this conversation for some rare and remote possibility that we might have a conflict? It seems like that's just not the case.
It seems to me like we're on the verge of litigation right now, so that we're in an adversarial position right now.
Because
give me just a second.
Yeah.
Under the reading of the charter that you are advocating, if we accept the proposition that we have, well, let me put it like this: if we accept the proposition that no one else has control over the city's legal affairs, then we have to accept the proposition that if in the future the city attorney's office is the subject of, or needs to be the subject of, an investigation because of some type of malfeasance or because of some type of wrongdoing, nobody else can initiate that and nobody else can manage that, because the city attorney has complete control over all legal affairs under the reading that you're advancing. And what my concern is this: if we do need to clarify the situation with the charter, that's a potential situation that we could face. Nobody polices themselves. And that's what that situation represents, and that's what that interpretation of the charter represents. So, the city attorney gets to interpret the charter, but what do you do in that edge situation? So that's just my point. I don't want to leave people with the impression that we're running around wanting to run roughshod over the law.
I understand.
Because we don't want to do that.
But I think maybe I'm anticipating the public response and concern to is what we're saying right now. This conversation's kind of evolved into, well, what if there's ever a conflict? Look, if there's ever a conflict between us, then we can work out getting counsel. But that's not what the H item says. And that's the issue. You want a second opinion, but you're going to acknowledge that I'm the top lawyer in the city? That's a conflict right there. You're the top lawyer, Gates. You are the legal voice, but we want to be able to go get a second opinion. It doesn't work like that. That's a conflict. You want to talk about conflicts in the charter? You're creating a whole nother set of conflicts.
Right.
And I'm simply not going to support, condone, or endorse complicating our relationship more with a second opinion that reports and support. It actually says supports counsel and reports to them directly by having, at times, competing opinions.
Let me just say, because we need to wrap this up, but there's no question the H item could have been written better, because I think what's absolutely come out tonight is really what we wanted it to be and not what's on the paper. So,
well, if you would like to table it and we could talk about some arrangement that you're satisfied with regard to conflicts.
I'm going to let my counsel decide that. So, did you want to respond, or is this old? No? Okay. Mr. Kalmick?
Yeah, so we kind of went a bit around, and we touched on some, I think, some fine points here. But there's some converse issues that I think were there. That the case you're citing is an established law. It's a non-published thing from 1985 that is not germane to this. And that's, again, your opinion. And if I'd like to have somebody else interpret that doesn't have a potential bias, arguably, because it is in direct conflict with your role as city attorney or your viewed role as city attorney in the city, I have to ask you for permission to go get somebody else to do that. And I'm all set. So you asked for some other examples of where you have gone off on this, right? Where the city council would direct you to sue someone, you don't get to sue someone without city council direction. Yes, that's effectively what the case is. You threatened to sue me in 2018 for using the public domain logo that you had done no research on to find out that it was public domain. And you apologized and deleted it all. You've spent money against a lot of us. So there's a personal issue, but that's not the case here. You've created this situation now where we've had a conflict a couple of months ago on the Fields case. Again, your solution is, I'm going to threaten to sue that person if they want to waive privilege, right? That's an adversarial relationship. We are, again, in an adversarial relationship where you're stating what you're doing is illegal. My reading of this, I don't agree with that. But again, the question to find out who gets to say it's illegal or not illegal, again, directly is direct in conflict to your opinion of it, puts you in a positive position, right? Where you would say, oh, no, actually, the city council is right. They should be able to go. Again, like, we're in this Ouroboros of roundabout way here. And again, the case you are citing is you would be sanctioned if you put this in a motion in a court case for putting this in there. This is an old court case that is not published, yet you're relying on it as established law. It's not that. It was used specifically for this case and for this case alone. So I think that the direction tonight is... And
may I respond?
I'm all right for now. I want to finish my thought here.
May I respond to these new contentions?
No, just what I don't want to do, I really would like to end. What I really was trying to ask the council is, where do you want to go from here?
That's where I was getting right into that flow.
All right.
So I wanted to ask the mayor what are steps forward here? All right, we've obviously, Councilwoman Bolton has stated that we are, I think, in an adversarial position. I don't feel that I have a lawyer that I can talk to that hasn't threatened to sue us, and so that's where we're at, right? Like, I would what if we do get sued? What's the next step? So I don't want to get sued. I don't want to get this. I'd like to defuse this situation and get to a point where I was just going to say, exactly. What's going to happen from tonight, we know this. There was, 50 people here. They're going to spin however. I think that's one of the things that really has bothered me about tonight. It just brings up, it totally negates what the facts are. Okay? I mean, we've all been hung by our toes. I'm not suggesting that you weren't. I'm just saying. And that's not what this was about. And so how do we go from here? Do you have a recommendation in all seriousness? Or Mr. Chi, do we table this tonight and then talk about it another time? I would really like to see us get resolution because the charter is in conflict. It is today, right now. Now, it wouldn't normally be a problem if we didn't have an issue, but we've got issues, and unless we get to talk about it.
If you want the conflict resolved, one thing that we could do is agree to file a friendly declaratory relief action with the court and just let a judge decide. I don't think I could ever see it that I don't think I could ever see it that the way the charter's read, that it allows you to independently hire second opinions that report directly to you. And there is a second opinion. You want a second opinion? The Cole Huber attorney's letter is a second opinion. And
For you.
But Mayor, these attorneys they've analyzed the law, right? And so, so now you like or don't like the first opinion, then you like or don't like the second opinion. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. No, I get you. I really do get you, but that's not where I'm.
A lot of attorneys have weighed in on this, and we wouldn't be sanctioned for showing the court the previous. All this lawyering going on is a little disturbing too. Like the charter lays it out. I am the top lawyer. I'm the only one in this room right now to offer in the state of California a qualified, credentialed, legal, like professional legal opinion. And yet I've got, Kalmick over here saying,
it's Mr.
Oh, I'm
Kalmick.
sorry, Mr. Kalmick, or Councilmember Kalmick, saying, well, you threatened to sue me back into...
Well,
I didn't. I said it's potentially violative, but I didn't threaten to sue him. So,
If the violation continues, we will sue. Nothing too big, nothing too small. Logo is potential to face a lawsuit. Please stop. It is illegal.
Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is call for the question, and if people want to go ahead and vote for this, or table it, it's whatever you want to do, because we can't go around and around and around like this. And yes, go ahead. Oh, Rob, go ahead, Ms. Bolton.
I would make a motion to table it so that we have a chance to discuss the process. But if we have to come back to it, then we come back to it.
I think that sounds reasonable. Do I have
So everybody we can vote on that.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
And this is to discuss, like was mentioned, we're going to go into closed session and,
There's a motion on the table.
If somebody wants to make a substitute motion.
So Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
So the motion tonight is to not, if you stipulate that you agree that what we would be doing is illegal, is to start a process that would then ask for contracts, which I don't know if that would. I've got the voting screen up, so I can't.
You can't stipulate that something's not illegal.
No. What I'm saying is that stipulating that your interpretation of the charter and what the action that we were taking tonight is illegal.
We were told how we felt was illegal.
Correct. That the action in the H item is to engage a process to facilitate the city council's selection of an outside legal firm. That doesn't necessarily exclude the city attorney from that position or from that discussion. City attorney's staff.
That's what I said in my notes.
I think that maybe lands this plane is that we can work with the city manager to develop a process for us to get outside counsel from this adverse relationship here and move forward from that angle, because again, we need to diffuse this until there's a charter resolution there. And so I think that that potentially gets us to that in some mechanism form, and if it breaks down, then we're back here having a conversation.
So, and I agree with you. If the city attorney is involved in the process, then that's what we can do now. We can do that now. Am I wrong? We can do that now.
Yeah, and if you wanted my office to put out an RFP to update our panel of available law firms, I think that's the thing that has been lost. You can have your cake and eat it too, so long as we're not violating the law. And as long as you run it through my office, we're solid. That's the distinction. If you're going to go to the city manager and go out and get your own law firm, then that's the distinction. That's unlawful. And it just is what it is. And if you don't like my interpretation or Cole Huber's interpretation or others' interpretation, then we can go to court and get a declaratory relief and get some judge to decide. I don't want to have to do that.
I just have a quick question. So if we did do an RFP to have advice for the council that went through your office, and let's say Mr. Kalmick did have a question, he could then contact that attorney for advice, because that attorney would not be the voice of the city.
Right.
It would be no different than an attorney that's working in your office. It's just that subcontracted.
Second opinion.
So there's a little bit to unpack there. So if there was a conflict where I was to recuse myself and a council member wanted to contact an attorney directly, well, the council would get legal counsel, right? It wouldn't be an individual member reaching out to a law firm anyway.
Yeah, we'd be going through you.
Right. That's the point. If there was ever a conflict, I would happily recuse myself.
Okay, so
and say, look, here's the panel of law firms. Pick one if there's an actual conflict. But we don't get to have a council member who's got an axe to grind with me from 2018 start convincing other people that somehow there's a conflict when there isn't one.
Okay, so if
just to get other counsel.
We come through the attorney's office
Yes.
to get a second opinion.
Yes.
Then we have a right to get a second opinion.
It's not even a right; it's a privilege. Let's do this together.
Okay,
yeah,
fine. I'm just saying the person who would show up, whoever that is, would probably still be talking with you or through you or whatever.
We'd all be there.
So,
but see, Mayor, you have to understand, in terms of piling on or layering on additional legal resources to help the council make good decisions, we do already do that. If you want us to update our RFP and get things more current and be ready, in the eventuality that there might be a conflict and I'd have to step aside and give you access to one of the law firms, then fine. But we layer on a lot of legal expertise in everything that we provide. So it's almost like a solution looking for a problem. We already do so much of this for you.
it doesn't feel like that, though, Michael, and I think that's the problem.
Well, I know it may not
The
feel
feeling's
good.
not the real, that's not the word.
It doesn't always feel good for me either.
No, I'm sure it doesn't.
But,
I'm sure it doesn't.
But, we provide counsel, city council makes the decisions, and then we go off and fight. If council decides not to fight, even in spite of our legal guidance, then we don't fight. Like,
Right.
you guys are pulling the levers on this in the first place.
Okay.
Barbara?
Yes.
Barbara? That sounds great, in theory, but one of the public speakers said that your job was to keep the council in check. It's not. Is that true?
So, again, what does that mean, right? I cannot follow council when they violate the law, right? Like, if you want to do something illegal, I can't follow you. I have to stay with the city.
That's
I'm here to
crystal
represent-
clear.
Okay. Right.
That's crystal clear.
So, what's your question?
I'm not confused.
Okay.
My question is, when we make a decision to not sue the state and you publicly contradict our judgment, you did.
I did.
You did. You said it's we need to fight this in Sacramento.
Yes, you
I
did.
can fight it. I can win. I won all the time. We made a decision not to fight.
Okay.
You didn't like that decision.
Okay. Here's the deal. If council is admonishing me now for making public comments about how we could fight, I will stop making public comments about how we can fight.
Thank you.
Okay?
That would go a long ways.
I appreciate that, and I hear you. But what council needs to know is when I've ever made statements about fighting for our local control, it's only been because our charter, which is our highest legal authority, has embedded in it local control. It is our law.
Local control is a policy decision.
But it's also our law now because it's in the charter. It is. You may not like it, but it's
okay,
right there. It's right there.
Then you got to define what local control is.
Yeah. Fair enough. But that's the only reason I've ever commented is because it is.
Well, and you
our
commented
local law.
you commented from the podium too.
Where are we going with this? What do you want? What do you want? It doesn't warrant violating the charter. None of this warrants violating the terms of the charter.
No, I don't think anyone's really trying to violate the charter. I think we're just trying to get access to the charter that feels fair. That's all.
And it may not even feel fair, but I want you guys to have the best legal representation possible. And oftentimes it does mean me going and getting my own second opinions for things, consulting other experts, bringing in other subject matter experts. You guys get, and it shows in our results, 90% plus win rate on cases is a remarkable. We're killing it in Huntington Beach. Now, are we fighting every battle? No.
No.
That's fine. We choose not to.
I think what you just said, for me anyway, you staying completely off social media would be a real win for us.
Well, now there's that,
I know.
right? Completely off of social media. That would be nice,
yeah, it
right?
would be. But we need to end this, and I'm trying to get consensus from everyone how you want to end it.
Can I?
Yes.
So I thought the motion was seconded, so the motion on the floor is to table it so that we can discuss a process. Yes. But was there a substitute motion? Because I didn't hear one.
No. Ms. Picard seconded.
No, I didn't know if, based on what Mr. Gates had said, if anybody was considering a substitute motion that included direct the city council and the city manager to process and facilitate a selection of outside legal firm, but adding with help with the city attorney. So maybe we table this and have a conversation about, if we do go forward, how we would do that.
Yeah.
So how we would do that.
Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mayor, so my only concern is that this still has to flow through the city attorney's office when there is potentially a conflict. And we've tried this before, where there was a conflict and the city attorney recused himself. And
well, we'll try again.
But maybe didn't get all the way there, right?
So if I could comment on that just really briefly, because it keeps coming up. It actually worked, but it worked for a previous council and you didn't like the results. That's the difference. You guys, you and Madam Mosier and Madam Bolton are newer. You weren't there, so you're looking back with the benefit of hindsight, saying, "Oh, things could have been done better." Yeah, but that's not an axe to grind with me. That's an axe to grind with previous council who made the decisions, right? Like the process actually worked. It just didn't turn out the way you liked it. But the previous council made all the decisions.
Ms. Carr, could you repeat your motion?
Well, my second still stands with
yes, with
Councilmember, to table it.
But that's not what happened, though, Mr. Gates. I'm sorry, but that's the thing, right? Is that the recusal was that the reason that I showed up new, I didn't know you were recused because you were in meetings talking about it. So,
well, as a defendant and a party, I'm entitled to be there talking about it. I wasn't giving counsel.
Therein lies the ability for us not to speak about this anymore, right? So, that's closed session discussion at that point, right? Past that point. So, I mean, therein lies the issue. And I can't speak about what those issues are, but.
So, Madam Mayor, maybe I can step in and try to provide the council with a recap of what's before you tonight and the decision you have ahead. There's an option right now on the table to, as I understand it, table this discussion, have the council meet in closed session to initiate the process for selecting additional legal support for the council. There's been a suggestion made also that maybe somebody might want to offer up a motion to direct selection, identifying a selection process to find outside legal counsel, but embed the city attorney's office in that discussion.
I would agree.
I think those are the two options before the council tonight. The council should likely at this point, based on the discussion, I don't know that there's going to be much more progress made in the back and forth. I think the best consideration at this point is, based on what you've heard, based on your experiences to date, how would you like to move forward with the matter? Obviously, council has the option to do nothing also. Yeah. But I think the option on the table to either table the matter for discussion at a future meeting is one option. The other option I've heard is to move forward with the recommendation in the H item as written, with the caveat that the city attorney's office be embedded in that process of selecting additional support for the council. And I think to try to narrow the discussion down to a decision, those seem to be the two options that have been deliberated tonight.
The tabling, though, is to bring it back to our next closed session, not
Correct.
Another public meeting. Okay, I'm fine with that.
What do you think about the?
Yeah.
What about his second comment?
I'll make that substitute motion, but have the city attorney be part. But again, the reason for this is that the city attorney would be part of the selection process, but then out the door after that.
And that would be violative if the
And there's
attorneys-
a difference of, and we've been back and forth. The
Yeah,
city
and
attorney
that's
has
the
one
difference of
opinion.
I
think
second your motion, Mr. Kalmick.
So you withdraw your first?
So just to be clear, Councilwoman Bolton, so to have a selection process to retain attorneys who report directly to city council? So now we're back to square
No, I
one?
thought it was to
Report to
table and discuss and have the
No,
city
yours
attorneys-
was to table and discuss.
Mr. Kalmick, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood your motion.
Mine was the second, which was very similar to what's in the agenda item, was what City Manager Chi discussed, which was to have the city council, direct the city manager to go and, outside legal firm that would report directly to city council, but embed the city attorney in that process so that there is a somewhat of advising consent. I don't know quite how that goes, but that, again, the city attorney would then pull the ripcord out of that process at the end, right? That we would have legal counsel for the council, again, in conflict situations. Like, that's, again, where I keep getting stuck on, is that we are in an adversarial relationship. I don't want to be here. Like, I want us all firing on all the same cylinders, but to have this consistent where it's like, yes, no, I've recused myself, but maybe not, and to have that situation where now we'd like to do something, but there was no conversation about it, that we're now being threatened to be sued by our corporate attorney. So that's
Ms. Carr.
Okay.
that's where I was at.
Well, one of the things I'm thinking about, if we bring it back to closed session, we can maybe then narrowly define what that would be.
Yeah.
When we go out, if you want to hire outside legal, and again, it would have to be with Mr. Gates facilitating that, but when would it be appropriate for him to recuse himself? And maybe that's the discussion that we have in closed session, to narrowly define what this firm would be used for and when it would be appropriate for him to be a part of those conversations, and not, rather than the carte blanche, okay, we've hired this firm, now you need to walk away, which is where I think that's where it gets a little bit confusing. I think there may be, this is why we probably should have table it, and I don't want to say table it, can we put it on the next closed session
continue
agenda?
the
Yeah, that's
Can
what
we
I think we
continue
need
it
to do.
instead of tabling it?
Did you want
And
to?
I would have to have Councilmember Bolton make the modification.
Yeah.
So the next meeting that we're going to have is the third Tuesday in January.
think
So
it's the 18th.
in closed session, we could then talk about procuring additional legal services, and when would it be appropriate for Mr. Gates to recuse himself or not,
And what that would look like.
and what that would look like.
That'd be the January 18th.
Okay.
With that
Yes.
friendly amendment?
That works.
And I'll second that as well.
Okay. Are you clear about that?
Yes.
City Clerk, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Bolton, you want to lock your vote in? All right, so the motion on the floor passes 7-0. So the item will be continued to a closed session agenda item on January 18th.
I would really like to express a great deal of gratitude to everyone who spoke here this evening. Kind of went around and around, I realize, but sometimes that's what you do, and then you get off and come back. So if there's no other comments, I would like to read something. I saw this partly because there's just a lot of people here in our community right now that have an awful lot of needs. And so I'd like to acknowledge them and just say you're going to come in contact with a lot of people who are absolutely at the breaking point this week. Friends, family, co-workers, teachers, strangers in the grocery store, retail workers. While it may be the merriest time of the year for some, it's the saddest, most stressful, loneliest, and most heartbreaking for others. We're all busy. but we're not too busy to be kind, caring, and patient. Remember, the best thing you can do, give someone this season, is love. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever other holiday that you want to celebrate, please do. And unless there's no other comments, I will adjourn till January 18th at 4 o'clock. Oh, okay, that too.